What's up, everybody? Just finished another episode of Angles, and this time it was with Larry Quinn. Probably a lot of you know the name. He is obviously ran the Sabres both at the end of the Knox's ownership, then came back with Tom Golisano as part owner and running the Sabres again. We talked about some crazy Sabres stories, what it was like running the organization. We talked about, hey, why did they change the jerseys from blue and gold to the goat head? We then talked about his serious involvement here in Buffalo, whether it's the Buffalo Board of Education, his thoughts on downtown, the Golisano Institute, which is an incredible thing coming here to Buffalo. I'm serious. It was a great episode. Make sure you check it out. Listen to the whole thing. I think you'll really enjoy it. And as always, this episode is brought to you by Richmond Vona Personal Injury Attorneys. When the unexpected happens, expect Richmond Vona. So I guess I just want to jump into it. We were just talking before we started. I'd love to hear about your experience at the 05-06 night with all the guys back in town recently.
Yeah. It was so much fun. First of all, they're grown up now. And without embarrassing any of them, but I remember talking to one who at the time always was button heads with Lindy, and he was telling me how wrong he was and what it turns out, he was saying Lindy's the best coach he ever had. And that's, with that adult perspective, but it was really fun. I loved seeing Max. I loved seeing Dmitry Kalinin, guys from Russia that I thought I'd never see again. And Dmitry especially, because he was pretty much as a player monosyllabic. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you how good his English was because he really didn't talk. But I really had great conversations with him. And, they're living in Russia. They are living in a normal life the way we live. I mean, the two of them drive their kids to hockey practice and have, kind of a normal life. And it was fun. I saw Al Kodalik is involved with a team over there, and I think he's part owner. And Yuri Novotny is, man, he's big. I mean, I remember him as a player not being that thick. And I don't mean fat. I mean, he's muscular. And I thought, wow, if he had this body when he played, he could have killed people. And Jay McKee, who I'm going to see again, and Teppo. And
Teppo doesn't age.
No, he doesn't. It's amazing. Neither does his wife, Anne Marit. I mean, they don't age. And it was funny. Before the game, the guys were down on the ice, and I was up in the suite, and I was talking to Anne Marit, and we were going through the lineup and talking about Finnish players. And I said, I think there's one guy here is from Finland. I think this, and it turns out I don't even know if he dressed the Hellenius that night, but I know he
not that night, but
he had a great game the other night. And I said, yeah, this guy's from Finland. And I pointed at the town, and she said, well, let me see that, because I said Hellenius. And she goes, I don't know who that is. And then I guess I'm not pronouncing the name right.
That just came out, yeah.
And she goes, oh, he's from our town. My son is his best friend.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny, but really great night.
That just got announced that we were all pronouncing his name wrong the whole time.
How do they pronounce it now?
I don't want to butcher it, but it's not Hellenius like we all thought. It's like Hellenus or Hellenus.
Heinous or something like that.
Something like that.
But she said it's their son's best friend. They've known him since he was a kid. Glowing comments about him. And, But we had that even back in the day. I guess Reggie Sekera, everybody called him Reggie because of the R-E-G on the end of his name. But we called him Sekera. I guess it was Sekera.
Yeah.
For the first several years, we called Henrik Talander. And Tony Ludman, we called Lidman. And I just, you find that out by listening to their national broadcast. And I said, Tony, is your name Ludman or Lidman? He goes, Lidman, whatever you want. It's, so a lot of these guys' names, they don't necessarily correct you when you're pronouncing them wrong.
When you think back to the 05-06 season, I mean, we all remember that, what happened with Carolina. Like, what are your thoughts on that whole thing?
It was just so sad because I do believe, and I still believe, we had the best team. We played that seventh game with at least one defenseman from the East Coast League. But our defense was without Teppo, without Hank Talinder, I think Tony Ludman came in that game, if I recall, without, I said McKee, Teppo.
Yeah.
So we had Doug Yannick and Nathan Page, great Nathan and good guys. But I mean, we substituted at that time American Hockey League, East Coast Hockey League player Jeff Gilson for, Teppo, who was a perennial, maybe not all-star, but really top player in the league, Jay McKee, top shot blocker. So it was, and I was saying this to somebody the other day, John Davison at the time was on the broadcast, and at the end of after the game, the seventh game, we had the lead going into this third period. And he came up to me, he said, I always used to think you guys from Buffalo were a lot of complainers. He said, but I'm devastated for you. And it's, we've all been through that with the Bills and the Sabres. And so, yeah, it's, you can't dwell on it. You can't change what happened. No. But I have a lot of fondness for that group. I had a nice talk with J.P. Dumont, and we were talking about the current team, and we were both comparing notes, and we both agreed on one thing. I said, you can have everything on paper and you can have all the statistics you want, but there's something about a team that gets formed and acts like a team, and when does that happen? And JP made the point. He goes, we loved each other, meaning that 05-06 team, and we trusted each other. And that realization, that ultimate trust happens at a point. You're not sure when it started. I'm sure Lindy's been a big part of that and creating that. But and this team in particular, I've been often thought, I don't know how many first round draft picks are on this team, but I think the majority of players on this team were drafted in the first round, or if not the second. And a first round player is coming from an environment where they were the star, and they were the man, they were the guy that made the play. And ultimately, that has to sort out, and some are third, and some are fourth, and some are checkers, and some are scorers. And until that acceptance happens, and then the trust with that acceptance, so trust that player is going to do what he has to do instead of trying to do it on his own, I think that's been their greatest challenge. They have a lot of talent, and you're now seeing a team that trusts each other and is playing for each other. It's exciting to see. It's just a lot what we did in 05-06. We were picked by, I never let him forget it, but Howard Berger from the Fan 590, I don't know if he's still around, but I remember he picked us to be in last place that year. Wow. And when you look at the last week of the regular season and even into the playoffs, we were the best team in the league. We beat Ottawa. Ottawa used to beat us by 5-6 goals every time we played. We would have smoked Carolina with our full team. Yeah. So, it's not. I don't want to say this team's going to win the cup or anything like that, but I think that they're happening. They're happening. It's pretty exciting.
So, I think you obviously, I know you stay pretty close to everything that's going on. But from your perspective, and you can answer this any way you want. Maybe it's going back to that 05-06 team, or just your experience as a leader in the National Hockey League. I think a lot of people are like, wow, it's pretty interesting what happened to these current Sabres, where it's the same players and it was a change in leadership. Is it that simple sometimes, just needing a new voice? I mean, and I know
sometimes it is, but I think it's maturity. Yeah. And it's not the same players. I mean, I think the addition of Stone has been a big change. I think Josh Norris is shown to be a really effective player, and hopefully he can stay more healthy. Yeah. The goaltending situation is in flux, but I think the addition of Lyon has been a big upgrade. Whether you consider him to be the starter or anybody else, it's a big upgrade over, Levi and UPL. So those are big changes. But I know Lindy well, and I know what he's about, and he's grown too, and he's matured as a coach. And it wasn't going to happen last year right away. I mean, first time he starts coaching these guys is last September, and I think it was probably unrealistic on everybody's part that he's going to create a team and then it's going to compete that quickly. But you're starting to see, the direction of a Lindy Ruff team right now, and there's buy-in and success. Success is everything, right? It makes everybody buy in. So it's a very exciting thing to watch.
I was listening to a podcast you did with, After the Whistle with Peters and
those guys,
and I was telling you before we started, I mean, it's incredible story about how you got started with the Sabres, I believe in '96 with the Knoxes. It's actually a pretty funny story, but I'd love for you just because there's a lot I want to talk to you about, is to briefly touch on kind of how you got started with the Sabres, because it's a really cool story, and how you just managed to, I guess, just figure it out. I mean, especially not coming, not having any background working in an NHL organization, and then just getting involved and having so much success so early.
Well, I think every job you have, it's not just outflow. You learn a lot from people around you. Mm-hmm. I was around a lot of good hockey people for a long time. I started in really 93. Seymour and Nordy had a lot of background. I learned from them. I learned a lot from John Muckler, a lot from Jerry Meehan, a lot from Don Luce. And that, you're there and when I was working on the building, you had to understand all the aspects of the building because you're building the venue that it's going to operate in. Yeah. So, I had to learn a lot. I played the game, so I think I had a leg up there that I understood it at a certain level, not at the level that these guys play at. And then when I got put in charge of the hockey team, I kept learning. And I had some very good mentors, Joe Crozier. I had a stint there where Bobby Orr was, just a sort of a mentor, would call me a lot and give me breakdowns of the game.
That's awesome.
Terry O'Reilly a little bit. And then later on, when it came to hiring Lindy and Darcy, and by that time I had been in the league enough that I knew other people. And Bill Torrey, I found Darcy Regier. I shared a cab with Bill Torrey from LaGuardia Airport to one of the league board of governors meetings, and he told me all about Darcy, and I should interview him. And
wow.
I already knew Lindy, but Lindy, when you talk to his teammates, especially Larry Playfer, Mike Ramsey, people like that, it just screamed that how much respect they had for him, how much leadership ability they thought he had. So it rises to the top very quickly, and it's usually not, the media darlings. If you look at the media and who's great and everything else, it's usually very different when you talk to players and people involved. Mm-hmm. I just learned. And the second time around, I thought I had a lot of experience, and it was a lot different. I wasn't meeting people. I already knew the people. I was able to cut through it a lot quicker and get to the heart of what we had to do.
So, yeah, you led the charge in the building of the new arena, which I remember as a kid when we were still in the they were calling it Crossroads Arena before you got the sponsorship, right?
Yeah, they have that Eric Clapton song or Cream song, Crossroads.
Yeah, I totally remember it.
I do too.
The question I had to ask, I was thinking about this. I'm like, what can I ask him about, like Sabres nostalgia? Is I would love to hear the story behind changing the logo the first time, because I know.
You mean
the colors and everything? Because
that
forever,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just so curious because we've gone through this series of these years where people are like,
you're talking about the goat head.
Yeah, I hate the goat head. Let's go back, and now they're like, it's I'm just curious what went into that.
It's a funny story. We had a woman who was in charge of merchandise. I don't know where she is this day, but she's very good. And Julie Scully, her name was. And so and I was tangential to it, but there was a group of people put together that Doug Moss had wanted to have a new jersey when we opened the new building. And there was a lot of discussion back and forth of who we ought to hire and who ought to do it, and should you go to the traditional hockey sources. And I had, previous to that, been living in Manhattan, and I lived in a building where Cindy Crawford was one of the people that lived there, and I'd become friendly with Cindy, and she was on that show House of Fashion on MTV, if you recall.
Yeah.
And so we were just sitting around the room one day, and I said, I could call Cindy and ask who's the hot designer these days. And they're all like, you don't know Cindy Crawford. I go, no, I really do. I mean, she lives in our and a whole bunch of them didn't believe it. So anyway, we're in a big conference room in the what they call the director's room. And I had called her previously to check in, and our secretary came in and said, Cindy Crawford's on the phone. I said, put her on the speaker. And she directed Julie to one of the designers that Burton Snowboard used. I can't remember the name of the company, but that's where it came from.
Oh, wow.
And, at that time, the black was, a lot of teams in the league were going to black, and that was kind of the hip thing at that time. I think it was well received. Kids today, now that's It's almost, well, it is. It's 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, they're probably coming full circle, and this is so cool. But I'm personally a blue and gold guy. We did that, when Tom bought the team. I don't know if you remember that or not, but there's a funny story behind that too. We wanted to reestablish, because the team had really been beat up, and we wanted to kind of get into, a rebirth of the Buffalo Sabres. And I thought, well, let's see if we can't go back to the blue and gold for the last game. And I called Gary Bettman up, and he said, yeah, we can make that happen. And so they had their team people send us stuff. And the day that we did that, I remember it was a Sunday, I think. I think it was Fan Appreciation Night. And the players didn't even know it. They went on the ice and warmed up in their with white, black, and red. And when they came back in the locker room, their stuff was all out there in blue and gold. And I remember Jay McKee calling me from the locker room, so excited. And so I've been a traditional blue and gold guy, but I understand the fascination with the black.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like, depends on what version of the Sabres you grew up with. Like, I grew up with obviously
the black and the red.
When you're really young, it was the 90s for me, so it's blue and gold, right?
Right.
And so you have an appreciation for all of them. But like people I know who grew up with the black and red, they're like, oh, I like the black and red. So. Well,
see, I'm old enough that I grew up with the bottle cap on the Bison, so that was my jersey, so.
So I know. You left the organization. I think, was it when they sold it? When he sold it to Regas? Is that okay?
No. They sold it. The Regas acquisition was made, but he didn't. It was a long process.
Yeah.
They slowly took over. I was put in charge of it for the last year and a half when it took to close. So Bob Rich and Knox put me in charge of it. And I had to weather that period. It was a tough period because somebody else is buying it, but you're working for the group that's there. I was loyal to them. I respected the fact that they're owner, and also understood that the new owner ain't going to keep me around. But so I got let go right before the playoffs, when we then ended up going to the conference finals that year. But that had been, the 98, I think, 96, 97 was Nolan, and then 97, 98 was the year Lindy came in. So I went through that whole period of, Teddy and John not coming back, and not dissimilar to the criticism Terry's getting right now on the change in coaching of the Bills. It was a very hard time. I would, someday, if I ever meet Brandon Beane, I'll put my arm around him and give him my advice for what it's worth, because it was a tough time. I used to, at one point, I had to have security around me because I got death threats. I remember the FBI. I didn't know it. They called the office, and some kid in his mother's basement. But it was a tough time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, without getting too personal, obviously, how do you think about a situation like you were seeing with Terry and Beane and the McDermott situation, where it's like a obviously very polarizing issue right now? From your perspective, because what a unique perspective to have.
Yeah, I mean, and I went through it. People love Teddy. I love Teddy. I stay in touch with Teddy to this day. But you're always faced with, making your best choice, and you're. I mean, the world is filled with people that will go along with the flow because it's uncomfortable. And but they rarely win. I mean, and I was in a situation where I really knew in my gut that we weren't going to improve with the situation that we were in, and we couldn't fix it. We tried to, we couldn't. And you come to a point where you say, if I'm going to make this better, and if I'm going to win, I've got to change it, knowing that it's going to be a real blowback. Terry came to that decision, and he's in the best position to know that. He knows the dynamics. Mm-hmm. He's, you can question him all who said what to whom. It's not relevant. I think that I take him at face value. He went in and said, I saw this terrible loss, and, they'd been to the playoffs many years, and thought, how am I going to change this? I can't just drive it back another year.
Yeah.
So I we'll see how it turns out, but I respect the decision, respect Sean McDermott enormously. It's nothing to do with Sean. I really don't think so. I think it's just there's a point in time where in sports is like that. Now, you don't want to be like some of these owners that change coaches every year.
Crazy,
Terry's not done that. But I think there comes a time, and it's going to be hard for the players. We had in our situation, players were really mad at me. I remember guys who are today good friends, they wouldn't even want to say hello. And, there was a lot of animosity in there because they're loyal to their coach. And you'll see probably some of that with the Bills. But, let's see how it turns out.
Yeah, it seems like, right, as a leader, I mean, I've never been leading an organization like that, like you have, but you've always been known for, and I've heard a lot about you in terms of like caring a lot about the culture, getting to know everybody in the arena, the players, whatever. And I got to imagine, like, obviously, you, as a leader, I mean, you have to balance, like, data or, results versus like this gut feeling of like in keeping your fingers on the pulse. How did you kind of manage that as a leader, especially within the Sabres?
You get better at it as you get more experience.
Yeah.
But first of all, I work for very good people. I mean, Seymour and Nordy were tremendous. Tom Golisano was tremendous. So it's always easier and better when you have somebody you're working for that's really a great leader. So it starts there. I don't think you can be a great leader in a sports franchise with an owner that's not a great leader. Mm-hmm. And if you look at a lot of the perennial losing teams in any sports league, it usually starts at the top. And so I was very blessed that way. I've always had this philosophy that goes way back that maybe a wrong one, but if I do the right thing, I may not work in the short run, but it'll work in the long run. So you might do things that get you fired, but you believe in it. In the case of the Reguses, I pushed back on them on a lot of financial things that I thought they were trying to get me to do that were wrong, and I wouldn't do it. Especially there were some covenants that we had promised the banks, and they wanted me to violate them, and I wouldn't do it, and I got fired, and it was a tough time. But I'm still here, and I feel good about what I did.
Yeah.
But so there's that. Nothing compared, what the Bills are doing. I don't think anybody did anything dishonorable or anything like that. It's just what it is. But you have to. You can't be arrogant. You can't be uncooperative. But there's a point at which something isn't right, and you can't do it for the short term, piece.
How did you actually? I never, even when I was talking to you last time, I never even asked. Like, I know you're really close to Tom Golisano, and I definitely want to talk about the Golisano Institute that's coming to Buffalo. But going back, how did you end up meeting him? How did you end up getting involved in acquiring the Sabres? And then obviously being the organization that second time around, and then what was that like going through? Because there was the bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff.
Tom at the time was running for governor.
Yeah.
Carl Palladino, who's a friend, called me and he said, "Hey, do you know this guy, Tom Golisano?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "We've been talking to him about trying to save the Sabres. Would you be willing to meet with him?" And I said, "Sure." So I met at a restaurant on Elmwood Avenue briefly and talked to him for a little while. And he said, "Would you be willing to put together some projections and some thoughts?" And I said, "Sure." And so I grabbed Dan DePope, Dan and I have been tied together for life here on all of our things. And we put together a package, Dan mostly, and we sat down with Tom and made a series of projections of what we thought the team would do. And Tom, I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to have this ruler with a magnifying glass in the middle, and he takes it out and he's rolling it all over the numbers. And he looks at me and he said, "This thing loses a ton of money." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And he goes, "Well, I got to hand it to you." He said, "I've never had a guy want me to be invested in a thing where told me the truth, so I give you that, but I'm not going to, this doesn't make any sense." And, okay. And then he called me, the meeting with Tom would have been in June, somewhere around then. And he called me late in August on a Sunday night. It was around 9, 10 o'clock at night. And who's that calling? And he said, "I've been giving a lot of thought to this, and I've been in and out of Buffalo running for governor, and I really come to understand how important this team is to the city." He said, "So without a lot of fanfare, would you be willing to work with me to put together a proposal?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'd love that." And so we did. And that was a period where you would submit your offer to the league, and we did our best, and they picked somebody else. And I just didn't, knowing the numbers, knowing everything, I thought the other bid didn't make any sense at all, but that's who they picked. And I was disappointed too, because I think that the league wanted Tom to dig into his pocket and give them some money that they probably didn't deserve, or we didn't have to, whatever. But I was kind of like, not irritated, but kind of like, come on, dude, why don't you just, you got a lot of money, why don't you put some more in and we can buy it? But I bit my tongue, and then a couple of days later I called him and I said, hey, can I come over and see you? And I just drove to Rochester and thanked him for working with me, and how it was a pleasure to get to know him and so forth. And he was great. And he said, I've done a lot of deals in my life. And he said, you never know when they're going to come back around. Just keep your powder dry. And we did, and the other bid didn't come to fruition, and here we are.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah. And then, I mean, you've told me a little bit about Tom, but this will kind of lead us into the stuff you're working on with him now. But how would you describe him? Like, because he seems like it's interesting to hear you tell stories. Like, this is a guy who literally started off like maxing out credit cards to start paychecks. Like, it's wild.
Yeah. First of all, probably the smartest guy I've ever known. Certainly financially, he's just got a good brain for numbers. The integrity thing I talked about, Tom Golisano, I'll relate a story to you. After we had owned the team, he called me one day and he said, hey, I want to bring some people to the game, whatever, such and such a night. Can you get me some tickets? And I just laughed and said, well, sure. And he goes, no, you're my partner. I'm not going to, it's revenue that I would be taking. He was so respectful that way. I mean, he was, and always is, but very bright guy, very high standards, can be argumentative, but for a purpose. He would, I've had so many arguments with him about stuff nothing to do with hockey. Like he calls the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression, and we have to argue about that all the time. So he's intellectually intense. He wants, and he doesn't necessarily even mean or agree with his position, but he loves the debate positions. Even when you're on vacation, I've gone on a lot of vacations with Tom, and we'll have lunch, and everybody be sitting around the table. All right, let's argue about this, And so he's that way. He's not a tough boss in this sense. He's completely fair. So you never have to worry about Tom of being capricious or, his wife or girlfriend decided to do something. Or he's just not like that. It's just straight down the middle. But he was very, he put you through your paces. And I figured that out right away about him. So I kind of like that because I feel like I can stay on top of what I'm supposed to do. But he would come into the office and say, okay, let's meet at 4:00. Wouldn't tell you about what. And then he'd come in and say, let's talk about food today. And you had to know what the concession sales were, what the prices were, what fan reaction to the food. I mean, he really drilled out. But he wouldn't give you the time to prepare ahead of time because he wanted to know how much you really knew instead of, snowed him. Yeah. And we had one like this early in the going, two of them actually. One was we had been, we weren't doing that great. We were kind of not even in the middle of the pack, kind of in the lower end the first year we owned the team. And we weren't scoring a lot of goals, and we were losing a lot of games 2-1, 3-1, 2-0, And I had some surgery issues, so I was out of pocket for a while, but it came like in the middle of December. I'd gotten out of the hospital. I said, I want to sit down with everybody and figure this out. So it was Tom and I and Darcy and Lindy, and maybe Dan was in the room, probably was. And he said, I want to know what you guys are going to do about this situation we're in. And I'm not giving any criticism to them. I mean, I'm just the way it was back then. And their solution was to get a better goaltender, trade for some D. And they made their presentation, and Tom looked at them all and says, well, I disagree. What do you think? And he came out with all these numbers. He looked at all the teams, and he said, we just don't score enough goals. And it was actually, it's funny, it was very pre-analytic, and he would use some measurements that were pretty basic back then, and today, they'd be more sophisticated. But He's using shooting percentage. Today,
Wow.
it's pretty normal
Yeah.
thing for people to use. But I remember at the time, Lindy's like, what? And anyway, it got sort of heated, not real heated, but it concluded by Tom saying, I don't want to make trades like that. He said, what I want to do is I'd rather lose 6-5 than 2-1.
Yeah.
And Lindy he's such a competitor, and he's a good guy in the sense that, once there's a direction, he does it. And I remember him getting up and saying, I'll get you more goals. And he didn't slam the door, but he closed it pretty hard and walked out. And the next thing I knew, he has Jim Corsi tied to the net, and he's got guys shooting at him. And we went from that point on, which was about the second week in December, from the 28th, 27th scoring team in the league, we finished at number 12, I believe. So from that point on, we were just about in first. And that was the rebirth of our team. And it ended up success in the standings in the playoffs too, but it was that turning point. That's the way Tom was. Very challenging, really good owner, very misunderstood. He didn't really humor the guys in the media too much.
Yeah.
And they Jerry Sullivan wrote, I never forget this. He wrote that Tom and I and Darcy were the Three Stooges, and this was after, having I think our entire tenure, we had the third best record in the league. But, it was a different time then. You don't have that kind of criticism today. Back then, it was intense. You had Empire Sports Network. You had Jim Kelly wherever he was working. You had Sullivan and Bucky Gleason, and whatever you might say about those guys, they were highly critical of us, and it was a tense, kind of environment. Jim Graham was around at the time too, and there was a number of guys.
What do you think? Why do you think it was so intense then? It's kind of like calmed down a little bit now.
Well, I think there were more media outlets.
Okay, yeah.
The Buffalo News was way more robust. The Buffalo News had at least. They had Tim, John, and Bucky. So they had, and Jerry Sullivan. So they had four guys that could cover you on any given day. So now they have, and Mike Harrington was around at the time too. So, and Mike is he can be critical, but I always felt he was more of a classic reporter than a guy who's writing a column for clicks and stuff like that. So it was there was just a lot more people, and the Empire Sports Network was not controlled by us. So you had, those guys too, Howard Simon and a number of them. I can't remember all of them, but, so it was a
lot of people, and especially in a small market.
I remember driving my car one day and I'm listening to Howard Simon on the radio telling people not to go to Sabre games because they stink and you shouldn't buy tickets. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're our rights holder. Now that would never happen today.
Yeah.
But back then there was a lot more independence and,
I want to jump over and talk about the Golisano Institute, but one last question. I'm curious about this because I've heard you say this a number of times. I hear all the time that, especially when the Sabres are doing well, like they have been recently, but even when they're not, that we're one of the top, like say TV markets for hockey, even when they're not in the playoffs, but like it's one of the top markets. What makes the business of running an NHL team so difficult in a market that, I guess, it's a smaller market, but like clearly when they're good, really embraces the team?
Well, when they're really good, people will embrace it. I think what makes it hard to do in the National Hockey League is you just don't have those major sources of national revenue.
Right.
So when you have a multi-billion-dollar television contract in the NFL, it's divided where they have 32 teams or however many they have. The National Hockey League has much bigger contracts now, but we didn't have them. Prior to the first cap, we didn't have revenue sharing. Our suite revenue just isn't as great. I mean, it's just all those things. So we never made money per se on the hockey, but we did make money as an organization because we really maximized our other revenues. We, did great in the concert business. We started this string of success that the Bandits now have, but that was a big thing for us. Those are the main sources. We maximized our food contract with Delaware North, and sometimes that got contentious, but it was the thing that we had to do to make our business work.
I just feel like, based on what I've heard you say and other things I've read, that people should be, I think, a little bit more thankful that Terry Pegula holds on to the team and keeps them in Buffalo.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, I think that Terry has the wealth to maintain it, but so a number of people have that. But what he has is the passion for it. And if you don't have that, I worry about the future of the team without him or without that kind of owner. The success hasn't been there in hockey, and it's been painful, and it's painful for Terry and painful for everybody else. And I think he suffered from some poor advice from people? Yeah, I do. But I think that's behind us. Mm-hmm. I think his new CEO, Pete Gwelly, is, I think, a pro. Well, I know a pro, not think. I know he is, and I think you're going to see a lot of stability now with Pete there. And then that comes with, that's probably in its own way leading to some of the success too. That stability at the top. You didn't have it before. They went through a lot of people that were running the sports teams, and I think that constant turnover wasn't good for anybody, certainly not good for Terry. But I think they've got a stable situation now.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for, right?
All right. I think the good thing too is, I've noticed more and more and more that his oldest daughter is involved, and that's good because you want successive generations to. And so I think that's very good.
Yeah, you've been. I think it's Laura, right?
Laura,
you've been hearing her name more and more now.
Yeah. She seems very involved. Seems smart. I think she's an engineer and no dope, and you want that. All
right. So, apart from the Sabres, you've spent your whole life really committed to Buffalo, urban economic educational development. You've served on Buffalo School District Board of Education.
Right.
Now you're heavily involved with the Golisano Institute, which already exists in Rochester, but now is opening up here this year in Buffalo in the old Buffalo News building, which I had a chance to tour with you, which was really cool. Why so much involvement when you clearly don't have to do it?
No, I know, and I think I'm sick in the head. My wife is always saying to me, would you stay home and stay, like even this morning, but. I don't know. It's just part of who I am. I grew up here. I love Buffalo. I've prospered here. I want other people to have the same success. I believe strongly that the pathway for Buffalo is having a highly educated, highly productive workforce. Mm-hmm. I think the tragedy of Buffalo is that we have, I think several thousand kids matriculate through the public school system a year. And due to a lot of deficiencies in how we educate kids in cities, but in New York State, we're really not maximizing our workforce. And what Tom's Institute's about is to try and counter that. And I think it's a brilliant way. It'll take a while to take hold, but our greatest resource is our people, especially in this world, because we're not tied to our geographic location so much anymore. Manufacturing can take place anywhere now. A lot of it's automated, so it's not. So it's the brain power that's the ability to get things done. The thing I worry a lot about, not only in the city but even in this country, is people have to know how to get stuff done.
Yeah,
and we've somehow lost a lot of that ability. I used to say it was sort of a joke, but it wasn't. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941, and by 1945 we had built the largest army in the world and had overthrown fascism, and yet it takes us 10 times as long to build a street down Main Street with the subway.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah.
We've just lost our ability to do that. Lost our ability to think, and so much of what we do today is, you put a label on something. What's this? And so you're either right wing, left wing, whatever. How about why don't we just be pragmatic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like housing. Let's do housing right. Let's do education right. I'm not on the side of the teachers union. I'm not on the side of charter schools. But my God, we're not doing it right. Mm-hmm. So how can you change? And it seems impossible. So I like to fight that stuff, and so the one thing that I have tried to do is not waste time on unwinnable battles. And in Tom's case, I think it's a great effort, and I'm very happy to be a part of it and work on it.
Well, what do you think after spending time on the Board of Ed? What were your biggest takeaways? Or, I know it's too complicated to explain here now, but like, what do you think are like the high level things that would need to change in your opinion to start making the progress that you're talking about?
Well, it's sort of in a very, very high level. Everything we do today is probably different than it was 2 years ago. And before that, it was different 4 years before that. Education, they're still doing it the way they did it in the 40s. There's no real recognition of, how people learn, and it's calcified. It's structured in a way that change is impossible. On the Golisano board, we're so nimble. I've been at it now for 2.5 years, and AI became the big thing a year ago, and we said, well, let's create an AI lab, and we just did it. And now we're one of the major institutes doing it. The biggest problem with education is, first off, teachers should be professionals, not union representatives. Principals should be part of management, not in a union. I know that people hate me to say that, but it's true. And if you could get professional principals who have some control over their fate and their curriculum and how they do things, and give them a certain amount of latitude to hire their teachers, just like anybody in any business. Right. It doesn't mean that you don't have protections. We have New York State education law needs a major overhaul, but we have civil service protections for teachers. We have New York State education law for protection for teachers. What I saw in the Buffalo school system are, out of 100% of the workforce, I'd say 20% are saints. 40 to 50% are pretty darn good workers, and 20 to 30% shouldn't be there. And that's true of every profession. You're a lawyer, and I'm sure that I know there are lots of lawyers or people that come out of law school that don't end up being lawyers or don't last because it's ultimately they're not good at it or they're not fit for it. And then the other thing is we don't protect our children. This tragedy that I saw in Buffalo were that so many kids are not being raised by adults for many, many reasons. A lot of single head of household. What I was shocked to find out is it's not just single head of household. There's no head of household. I run into kids, where's your dad? Oh, I don't know. Where's your mom? Well, my mom lives in Florida. Well, who do you live with? Well, my grandma, or I stay at so-and-so's house. And it just doesn't work. So, I think the school system needs to be completely ripped up, and we have to look at the development of children and start at age 2. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, that's expensive. Well, it isn't really when you consider the money we spend on police, courts, welfare, all the things we spend. We spend enormous fortunes, but we really won't spend it on the child. We'll do everything around it. But our court system is incredibly expensive. Our police forces are incredibly expensive. The welfare system doesn't help kids. And as a result, what happens? Well, first of all these kids don't go to school. I mean, the absenteeism rate in the city of Buffalo is scary. Yeah. And even those that are marked present aren't really there. They're coming in for lunch. So I'm disappointed, really disappointed in, on all levels, both state and federal, that there's not a debate about this. Mm-hmm. Trump is, rightfully or wrongfully dismantled the education department, and that's his whole program in education. Yeah. I don't remember anybody running for governor since probably Cuomo really talk about what we have to do to reform education in New York State. You never hear it.
It's true.
And it's the saddest thing. And every time you pick up the newspaper or go online, I guess today, but you're hearing about China and how they're far ahead of us now. Well, that has major consequences in 20 years.
Yeah.
So, So I stay involved in it because I feel strongly about it.
Yeah, and I guess like the positive thing is what you guys are doing with the Golisano Institute. So it's already in Rochester, and I'd love, and now it's opening up. Is it opening up this fall, right here in Buffalo?
Yeah.
That's the aim, right?
Yeah.
In the old Buffalo News Building.
In the old Buffalo News Building.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And can you just kind of describe, what it is, who it's for, what makes it unique, maybe what makes it maybe different than getting an MBA, like that kind of thing?
Well, the first thing is an MBA. You got to go to undergraduate first and then go to get a master's. I had somebody recently visit the institute and said, I got my MBA, and we'll say the name of the school from here. And this is more rigorous than that.
Yeah.
What we're about is cutting away all of the generalized education and doing all the things that someone needs to be either an entrepreneur or they call them intrapreneurs. Entrepreneur is pretty self-explanatory. You start your own business. Intrapreneur is somebody that within a company develops energy and business and ideas, and so they're entrepreneurial in a corporate environment. We teach accounting 1 and 2, finance, labor law, environmental law, public speaking, and we have a forum that we have learned experience for people come in and talk. As I said, we have an AI lab, and we're just very rigorous. It's a 2-year program with very little off time. Like we have a summer break of a couple of weeks, not the whole summer.
Yeah.
And when you get out, you are very, very employable. Mm-hmm. And what we're finding is on our first graduating class, we placed every single student in a job.
Wow.
We've had some companies tell us we'll take everybody you produce, not in New York State, but a Florida company. And the nice thing about it, too, first of all, it's all ages. I mean, there's some people that have gone to college and come back, some kids right out of high school, some in the middle. They're all college-accredited courses. So here in Buffalo, Niagara University accredits our course. I think we're going to do an accreditation program with Damon, and eventually we'll do it with Syracuse University, St. John Fisher, I believe University of Rochester, RIT. So any class you take with us is a college-accredited course. So you do this and our tuition is a max of $9,000. So you learn all that. You really have learned equivalent to an MBA for $18,000.
That's wild.
Unless you qualify for income assistance, and we provide that. So, and if you decide after all that, well, I still want to get a college degree, you haven't lost any time. You've got 2 years of accredited courses. So it's a great model. It will, as people get comfortable with it, right now, if a student says to their parents, I want to go to the Golisano Institute, and the parents, what's that? I want you to go to college. Well, it was way better than college, and certainly in a way better way to start. And the universities recognize that. Father Maher at Niagara completely understands that it's a great complement to what they do. Mm-hmm. And again, those students who want to get that degree or feel it's important or go on for a master's later on, they're available to them. They haven't lost time with it. So they were one of the first schools to do an accreditation agreement with us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I've seen some of the speakers that you guys have brought through in Rochester. I mean, these are these are national or world-renowned speakers coming through, which is really amazing.
Yeah. The ones that I'm most familiar with, and there's a long list, but here locally, Bill Giesel spoke from Rich Products. Yep. Jim Dettinger, who's running our institute, did, but Jim Boeheim did. I think he spoke a couple of times. Anthony Scaramucci,
I saw that. Yeah,
spoke there. Tim Shriver, I don't think he has Kennedy in his name, but Eunice Shriver's son spoke there. Monahan from Domino's Pizza. I mean, and it's all about exposing students to, what's it like to succeed? What did you have to do? What kind of sacrifice did you make? What was your philosophy? And then they have access to these guys, and we're going to continue on with that. You're a 20-year-old kid and you're studying accounting and finance, and you can raise your hand and ask Bill Giesel what it's like to run Rich Products.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
I think one of the surprising things for young people, I would even say this for myself to this day, whether it's talking to someone like yourself, someone similar to you, is, everybody has so much humility. Like people with the most success, I feel like have the most humility a lot of times.
Absolutely right.
And they're like, I failed so many times. I'm still figuring this out every day. I started with whatever it is. And I think it's really powerful for younger people to hear that because, I think about it whether it's when I started the business or going back and being younger, and you're like, this guy's got it all figured out. Like he has all the answers to all the questions, and you're like, no, they're just trying to figure it out.
No, it's like, Tom, I think I'm an example of that too. I mean, you go in there and it's really about your resilience, right? You get knocked down on the floor, and can you get back up? Mm-hmm. And can you recognize that everybody has to go through that?
Yeah.
Going back to the sports analogy, I think a young hotshot first rounder comes in, and it's not so easy. Yeah. And the mature ones, the strong ones, figure it out and start to win hockey games. It's just like that in life.
Yeah.
Tom Golisano started many businesses,
and
he still owns some of them. It's really funny, this kind of stuff he did, but he did it.
Yeah. So, in addition to what you're doing for the community in terms of providing this opportunity through the Institute, I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've always been a huge proponent of really building up like downtown. Mm-hmm. I think you took some swings at maybe I think it was maybe Bass Pro Shops or other things that maybe could come and like revitalize downtown. Mm-hmm. And we're at a period of time where I think maybe some people feel like, hey, the Buffalo Billion thing was great. Everything was going well. COVID happens. Like we kind of went into a slide. Like, are we back? Like these restaurants are closing. What's going on in the city? I mean, obviously it sounds like just the Institute's presence right down there is going to have a huge impact. But what are your thoughts on maybe, what's going on with the city and maybe how the Institute will play a role in kind of like getting it back on track?
Well, that's you're
like, how much
thing
time
to
do you
consider.
have?
One of the things that people don't realize what I did or was involved with, I should say, is when I was working for Jim Griffin, did a lot of new housing in the neighborhoods. Jim Pitts and I developed a program of new housing, and we built lots of housing on the east side, but they're all single-family homes with home ownership. And our philosophy was, whatever we subsidize this with, the equity in the house is left in the community. So back then, when you were involved with the housing program, you bought the house for a very low amount of money, but you owned it and you had equity. Today's programs are all about rich Wall Street guys getting tax credits for building low-income housing and taking all the money and throwing poor people into a high-rise building. That's looks as though that's primarily what the city's strategy is. I think it's foolish, but I don't mean to demean everybody. There's some great scattered site housing stuff, but I'd say the ideas aren't big enough right now. You have to really look hard at your assets and say, okay, what sets me apart and what creates economic growth? The water is our biggest asset. I worry that it's being squandered. So I think maybe we can help being part of the Inner Harbor stuff. But you look at what happens with the DL&W, and you look, instead of, making the same mistake again, what they're doing at Marine Drive Apartments, that's proven it doesn't work. So why not do something different? Instead, they're doing it all over again. Yeah. It just drives me nuts. I think the future for Buffalo is how well their public education system is. Right now, it's terrible. And if it doesn't significantly improve and change, we're going to have more of the same. And this has been going on now for 50 years.
Yep.
And it's terrible. It's very racist. I mean, they're dooming black children to not a great future because they're not providing them the opportunities for education that has to happen. So you can be mayor, governor, whoever you want. If you don't change that dynamic and change it in a big way, what are you going to do? You bring in another, Bass Pro was never really an answer. It was one idea, but it's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
And warehousing poor people in high-rise buildings and keeping them there. And if they get a job, they lose their apartment. And it's just, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like a doom cycle. Yeah,
it's just, you're really just sort of saying, well, I'll take care of you, and I'm going to say I'm all for poor people and all for affordable housing, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But really, in reality, what you're doing is you're building stuff that's being financed by rich Wall Street guys that are getting enormous tax credits, and then they're taking a lot of poor people from Buffalo and throwing them in there. And what happens?
Yeah.
You live in a high-rise building that generally will eventually be not safe. So you got to do things that produce equity in the part of the people and education, and then in the housing programs if it's actual real liquid equity. That's what we have to do. We're not doing it.
Yep.
I'm sure everybody in the business community feels the same way I do. But imagine if you had 2,000 more per year highly educated kids who are really on top of things. That's New York. When I lived in New York, it was a pretty dangerous place. It was pretty scary. What's the biggest thing that happened in New York? A huge influx of just really talented young people. Mm-hmm. That's what changed New York. Now all of Brooklyn has developed, and all these companies are there. And when I was there, it was, everybody was leaving. Mm-hmm. And they did leave, but they replaced them with something else. And that's probably the biggest thing that's not happened in Buffalo is now we have some good efforts. Bill Maggio's effort in 42 North is a really good effort to try and develop that entrepreneurial. So that's a really good thing. Yeah. Their success with selling their interest in ACV and creating a foundation is a really good thing. The medical campus is, still catching on, but the Nick Hopkins legacy is big up there. And, if you want to look at big decisions for the near term, who's going to be the next president of UB? Yeah. And are they going to be, a community leader? Are they going to use that university to transform this community, or are they going to be a guy that sits out there and worries about research grants? I mean, so these are the challenges in the short run.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm glad I asked you that question. That was very insightful. I'm serious.
I tend to go off on
it. I love it.
But it's, after 50 years of doing this, what's right and what's wrong,
Well, you're passionate about it. And I think that's a common thread that we find with anybody we speak to, like yourself. Like there's that passion there. Like everyone's got it, who's gotten to that level. And they have different passions, but that's a common thread. All right, so I want to be mindful of your time, so I just have a few smaller, rapid fire Buffalo questions.
Sure.
Favorite Buffalo restaurant?
Bacchus.
Okay.
Bacchus on Chippewa.
Yeah, that place is great. I feel like sometimes it gets overlooked.
Bacchus and I can't ignore Hutch's either, but the two of them are really great.
Okay. What do you think is a thing, whether it's like when you were with the Sabres, players coming in, or when you entertain business people here, is the thing that surprises people the most about Buffalo, if they're not from here?
Really, the friendliness of the people. The other night, we were all talking about it, and I think it was Ryan Miller's dad, who never even lived here, and he said, there's just something special about these people here. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what most of them, a lot of them, when they come in, they go, their only experience in Buffalo is coming in with a visiting team, and they came in at 1 a.m. and they probably were stuck in the Adams Mark or something and came over and played a hockey game and probably thought this was Dante's 5th version of hell. But once they learn what the community's like, they change quickly.
That's awesome. Okay, last question. You've been involved in so much in Buffalo, and we've talked a lot about it. What's maybe one story that you think about, whether it's with the Sabres or something else in Buffalo, that you're like, either I bet a lot of people don't know that and would like to know it, or they got that wrong? And it could be anything.
Wow. Well, there's so many kind of interesting stories, but I would say that this is known by a lot of people, but still not known, is that, and he just passed away last year, Nick Hopkins was our, he was a great neurosurgeon, also helped us a lot in the Sabres, but he was and became really the father of non-invasive surgery in the world. Nick started doing this, as he described, when I used to do it initially, it was like sticking a coat hanger up somebody's veins. But Buffalo is a national center for that. It's now called the Jacobs Institute. Yep. But I think that that's something that most people just have no idea. Mm-hmm. And they're doing amazing, Adnan Siddiqui over there is doing amazing technological growth. And I hope someday it's not dissimilar to what, Cleveland Clinic became known as the heart clinic in the world. Now, everybody's doing non-invasive surgery now. I don't mean that you can only do it there. But I think the constant development of the technology is taking place there. and maybe someday that will really benefit us. But there's so many things. I mean, it's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, I know. I figured. I just wanted to see which direction you go with it.
Yeah,
and I appreciate it. Well, Larry, thanks for your time. This is amazing.
John, it was really enjoyable.
Thanks so much.
You.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks.
Right, really good.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was fun. I like doing this.